detention orders. Open the doors immediately.
Not without a warrant.
This is not a warrant situation. Open the doors or you going to prison.
There are 37 children on this van. You're not getting on.
Immigration and Customs Enforcement. We have detention orders. Open the doors immediately. Not without a warrant. This is not a warrant situation. Open the doors or you're going to prison. There are 37 children on this van. You're not getting on it. 6 federal agents, a church parking lot, a youth leader who didn't move. What followed was 10 minutes that ended one man's freedom and 3 days later, collapsed a federal case in ways nobody in that courtroom saw coming. If that story means something to you, hit like and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. New here? Subscribe, we post a new story every week. Let's get into it. It was an ordinary Tuesday pickup. The Grace Community Church parking lot in Minneapolis Cedar-Riverside neighborhood ran on a reliable summer rhythm. By 3:30, parents were already lining the curb. Grace Community Church parking lot in Minneapolis. Kids in vacation Bible school, t-shirts filtered out of the side entrance in loose clusters. Somali kids, Latino kids, black kids from the surrounding blocks, most of them from families who relied on the free program for childcare, hot meals, and something structured to hold the weeks between school years together. The white church van sat near the lot entrance, engine running. Brother Andrew James, who had coordinated the camp every summer for 15 years without a salary, was running his usual head count before pulling out. He had 37 children loaded when the SUVs came in. They entered from both ends of the lot at the same time, 3 vehicles. Black, no markings, moving with the particular speed of people who had rehearsed the approach. Road cones went out. 6 agents in tactical vests took positions around the van before most of the parents on the curb had processed what they were seeing. The lead agent, a man named Victor Kane, raised a megaphone. The children inside the van heard it before they understood it. The singing stopped. A 7-year-old near the back window pressed her face to the glass and then pulled back. Backpacks came off laps and got held against chests. The crying started quietly, the way it does when children are frightened but haven't been told yet whether they're allowed to be frightened. A few of the older kids went very still in the particular way that children from certain neighborhoods learn early, the stillness of making yourself small when authority arrives loudly and unannounced. Brother Andrew killed the engine. He was 43 years old, over 6 feet, and had spent the better part of 2 decades working with children in a neighborhood where underfunded and overlooked were not abstractions but operating conditions. He was not a lawyer. He was not a community organizer with a publicist. He was a man who ran a Bible camp out of a church that let him use the parking lot, who bought school supplies with his own money when families ran short, and who had, over 15 years, built the kind of institutional knowledge about what these children needed that no city database tracked or compensated. He stepped out of the van. He did not move quickly. He positioned himself between the agents and the vehicle, facing Kane, and stated clearly that he would need to see a signed judicial warrant before any agent approached a vehicle containing 37 minors on church property. His voice did not shake. It also did not perform calm, it simply was calm the way a person is calm when they have already decided what they are and are not going to do. Kane's response was immediate and practiced. This was federal immigration enforcement. Warrant requirements did not apply. The driver was currently obstructing federal officers, which carried felony charges. He had one opportunity to step aside and open the doors. Brother Andrew turned back to the van window and began leading the children in a hymn. It was not a gesture. It was not symbolic. It was the most useful thing he could do in that moment, give 37 frightened children something to do with their voices and their breath while he pulled out his phone and sent 3 texts. One to the church's attorney, one to the head deacon, one to a parent volunteer who lived 2 blocks away. The singing was unsteady, cut through with sniffles, some kids mouthing the words without sound. It was not moving in the way that gets described later. In the moment, it was just children trying to hold on to something familiar while adults argued outside their window. The standoff ran 10 minutes. Agents moved to the windows. Fists on glass. Repeated warnings about arrest. At one point Kane stated directly that Brother Andrew was going to prison in front of these children if he did not open the doors in the next 30 seconds. Brother Andrew did not open the doors. Parents on the curb had stopped trying to reach their children and were filming instead, some of them on the phone with lawyers or relatives, a few of the mothers praying aloud in Somali and Spanish. Traffic on the street outside had backed up half a block. A local news helicopter found the scene somewhere around minute 7. The clips were already moving by the time the police arrived. Brother Andrew raised his hands before anyone told him to. He was cuffed in the parking lot, walked to a patrol car, and processed without incident. He did not resist and he did not speak except to ask, once, whether the children were being returned to their parents. 3 families were pulled aside by agents. The separations were not quiet. The van doors stayed locked until every remaining child had been walked directly to a parent or guardian. It took 11 minutes. The lot was fully cleared by 5:15. By 10 o'clock that night the footage had 14 million views across platforms. Protests gathered at the federal building downtown and outside the church. The hashtags were the kind that trend for 3 days and then get replaced by something else. Local news ran the story at the top of every broadcast, cable picked it up by morning. In all of it, the coverage, the commentary, the outrage, the same image kept circulating, a tall black man in a faded blue polo standing between a van full of children and 6 federal agents. Not moving, not arguing, just standing there. Nobody who shared it knew yet who he actually was. That part was still coming. The federal courthouse in downtown Minneapolis filled up before the doors opened. People had driven in from outside the metro, from Duluth, from Rochester, from across the river in St. Paul, because they had seen the footage and needed to be somewhere it was being addressed. By 8 in the morning the gallery was at capacity. Cedar-Riverside families occupied entire rows, mothers who had taken unpaid leave, fathers who had traded shifts, grandparents who did not fully understand the legal proceedings but understood the basic arithmetic of the situation well enough. Strangers sat beside neighbors. The room carried the dense, particular energy of people who had come not to watch but to bear witness. Brother Andrew James entered through a side door at 8:52. He wore the same faded blue polo he wore every camp morning. No suit, no tie. His court-appointed attorney walked beside him, a civil rights lawyer named Marcus Webb, who had taken the case the evening of the arrest and filed his first motion before midnight. Brother Andrew moved through the room without acknowledgement, took his seat at the defense table, and set his hands flat on the surface in front of him. The charges were read into the record by the clerk in the flat, procedural tone of someone reading a grocery list: obstruction of federal officers, interference with immigration enforcement, reckless endangerment of minors. Each count carried potential prison time measured in years. The prosecution sat straight. The gallery sat very still. The bliss commoned as minors. Agent Victor Kane took the stand first. He was composed in the way that federal officers are trained to be composed: measured, factual, professional. He walked the court through the sequence of events in Cedar-Riverside without editorializing. He confirmed the megaphone order. He confirmed the refusal. He confirmed the arrest. The prosecution then played the full 10-minute audio from the operation, every pounded fist, every escalating threat, and underneath all of it, thin and persistent, the sound of children's voices holding on to a hymn. The gallery did not move during the playback. Several people stared at the floor. Webb's cross-examination did not go after Kane personally. It went after the paperwork, or rather, the absence of it. Question by deliberate question. Webb established that no judicial warrant had been sought or presented before the approach, that the intelligence supporting the detention order had not been independently corroborated prior to the operation, that the decision to execute the intercept in an active church pickup zone during peak afternoon hours, surrounded by minors, parents, and recording devices had been made without a written risk assessment or required supervisory sign-off, that lower visibility protocols existed and had not been followed. Kane answered each question accurately and without deflection. He did not argue. He did not qualify. And the picture that emerged from his own testimony, question by answer, was of an operation that had moved fast and skipped steps that existed for reasons. Then the defense called its witnesses. A Somali mother named Hodan took the stand and spoke through an interpreter. Her testimony was not about the parking lot. It was about the years before it, the night her husband was detained and she had no one to call. And Brother Andrew had driven her to 2 federal offices and a legal aid clinic before midnight, and then sat with her daughter on the floor of her apartment until the child cried herself to sleep, because there was no one else and he did not leave. It was about the school year her daughter had gone without proper winter clothes and a backpack of supplies had appeared at the church door with no note. It was about what 15 years of presence looks like to a family that has learned to expect absence. Hodan spoke for 12 minutes. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. A Latino father named Ernesto followed. His son had cycled through 2 school suspensions and a near expulsion in the same 12 months he first attended the camp. He had not been suspended since. Brother Andrew had not intervened with the school, had not counseled the boy in any formal sense. He had, as Ernesto put it simply, made his son feel like someone was paying attention. 6 summers in a row. Not once had he missed a session or sent the boy home early. The church secretary read written statements from 43 families. She read each one in full. The gallery heard about hospital runs at 2 in the morning, about grocery money quietly passed through the church office, about a teenage girl who had lost her mother in February, and been walked home every single evening for 11 weeks by the same man who showed up the next morning to run camp like nothing had changed. 43 statements. The secretary read every word. By the time she finished, the courtroom had been sitting with the accumulated weight of 15 years for nearly 2 hours. Do you believe quiet guardians like Brother Andrew, people who show up without recognition, without salary, without applause, deserve to be seen? If this story is already reaching you, type hero in the comments or share it with someone who needs to hear that this kind of person still exists. Now let's keep going, because the most important moment in that courtroom was still ahead. Judge Patricia Okafor leaned forward, removed her glasses, and looked at the defense table. She asked if there was a final exhibit before closing arguments. Webb said there was. He looked at Brother Andrew James. Brother Andrew James stood slowly. He had been still for most of the proceeding, the particular stillness of a man who has learned, over a long time, to take up only the space he needs. But when he rose now, there was something different in it, something that the people in the gallery later described in different ways, but consistently, his hands were not steady. Not from fear. From the weight of something he had been carrying alone for a very long time and was about to set down in a room full of strangers. He reached into the breast pocket of his polo. He withdrew a worn leather folder, small, creased at the corners, the kind of thing that had been opened and closed many times over many years. Inside it, a single military citation, faded at the edges, and a photograph. He walked to the bench and placed it in front of Judge Okafor without a word, then returned to his seat. The courtroom was completely silent. Judge Okafor opened the folder. She read. The room waited. She read it again, not because the language was unclear, but because what it described required a second pass to fully absorb. When she looked up, she did not look at the attorneys. She looked at Victor Kane, still seated in the witness chair across the room, and held his gaze for a moment before she began to read aloud. The citation was dated 2011, Kandahar Province, Afghanistan. It documented, in the spare and exacting language of military commendation, a patrol pinned down under sustained enemy fire, 4 personnel wounded, evacuation impossible through standard channels. It documented a sergeant who had crossed open ground without cover, neutralized the immediate threat, and carried all 4 wounded soldiers to safety. It named the sergeant. It named the conditions. It was specific enough that anyone who had been present would have no difficulty recognizing the day it described. Victor Kane's hands found the railing in front of him. His face did not collapse. It did something quieter and harder to watch. It went through a sequence of recognition that had no name and no performance to it. He had known since 2011 that a sergeant had pulled him out of that field. He had been told the extraction details were operationally classified, the name unavailable through standard channels. He had filed 2 informal inquiries in the years that followed and received nothing. He had stopped looking approximately 4 years ago, not because he had stopped wanting to know, but because there was nothing left to look at. He was looking at him now. He had been looking at him across a parking lot 3 days ago and had not known. Kane stood up from the witness chair, not because the judge asked him to, not because procedure required it. He stood because sitting was no longer something he could do. He walked across the courtroom floor, past the prosecution table, past the gallery rail, past the cameras, and stopped at the defense table in front of Brother Andrew James. What passed between them in those seconds belonged to them. People in the gallery reported it differently. Some said Kane tried to speak, and the words did not come. Some said Brother Andrew simply looked up at him with the same measured calm he had carried through the entire proceeding. Some said there was a nod. What every account agreed on was that it was brief and unperformed, and entirely private, despite being witnessed by a full courtroom. Kane extended his hand. Brother Andrew took it. The gallery came apart quietly, at first the particular sound of people exhaling something they had been holding, and then less quietly, and then a Somali mother in the second row was openly weeping, and Ernesto had his face in his hands, and somewhere near the back a sound started that was not crying exactly but was adjacent to it, and the bailiffs near the door were looking at the middle distance the way people do when they are trying not to be seen feeling something. Judge Okafor set her glasses on the bench. She looked at the room for a moment, then looked at her notes, then looked at Brother Andrew James. She dismissed all charges with prejudice. She entered into the record a formal recommendation that the Cedar-Riverside operational protocols be reviewed at the supervisory level, citing the absence of a warrant, the absence of a risk assessment, and the presence of 37 minors in an active pickup zone. She further recommended Brother Andrew James for the Presidential Citizens Medal for 15 years of uncompensated service to children in Cedar-Riverside and for documented heroism in the field at Kandahar Province in 2011. Then she said, for the record, that the court was in recess. The room stood. Not all at once, not in the coordinated way of a performance in the uneven, ragged way of people who have just run out of the capacity to remain seated. People stood on benches. Church members who had never met embraced. The bailiffs let it happen. Brother Andrew James folded the citation, replaced it in the leather folder, and returned the folder to his breast pocket. He shook Webb's hand once. He did not look at the cameras. He walked out the same side door he had entered through and did not stop for the press gathered outside on the courthouse steps. Webb handled the statement. Brother Andrew was already gone. By that evening the story had lapped itself. The parking lot footage, the arrest, the Bronze Star, the identity of the wounded soldier Kane had spent years trying to locate, all of it moving across every platform simultaneously. Every network had a version by 10 o'clock. The revelation framing dominated the coverage. The ICE agent and the man he arrested, bound by a debt that neither of them had known was owed in that parking lot. None of the coverage showed the moment after Brother Andrew left the courtroom. There was nothing to show. He went home, made dinner, and set his alarm for 6:15. The next morning the Grace Community Church parking lot filled before 7. The children arrived the way they always did, loud, uncoordinated, carrying too much. Brother Andrew stood at the van door in the same blue polo and the same whistle and ran the same head count he had run every summer morning for 15 years. He high-fived each child as they climbed in. He asked about homework. He confirmed, for the third day running, that yes, the water balloons were still happening at recess. A news van idled across the street. Brother Andrew did not look at it. The van pulled out at 7:22. The camp ran its full session. 37 children went home at 3:30, sunburned and tired, still arguing about the relay race. Brother Andrew locked the van, filed the day's attendance sheet, and finished the supply inventory he had been putting off for a week. He was done before 6. The world had spent 2 days deciding what he was: hero, symbol, story, lesson. He had not participated in any of that. He had simply continued to be, as he had been for 15 years, the man who showed up. He had carried wounded soldiers through smoke in a province most of the country could not locate on a map, and he had carried neighborhood children through summers most of the country never thought about. And he had done both without asking anyone to notice, which is the only way either thing gets done. The news van left before 7. The parking lot was empty by 6:30. Tomorrow the children would be back. So would he.
If you like this video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next story. Share this video with someone who would appreciate it, and let's keep building this community together. And before you go, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what stood out to you the most. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next.